Okay, our next presentation will be by Paul Gasper, CDO of Corvus, and his presentation is on investment management, automation, and value creation, AI value creation opportunities within the insurance value chain. So please come to the stage, and I will give the baton to you. So please welcome Paul.
Thank you.
Thanks, Paul.
No, it's actually, I got scared because I...
All right, is the mic working okay? Awesome. Well, thank you, Lenita, for the kind introduction. Before I dive in, I'd like to be able to just give a little bit more background about myself. I basically have had a 30-year career in applying technology and towards the service of creating efficiency and a better customer experience. The last 10 years have been leading data and analytics organizations that generate business value in financial services companies of all sorts. For instance, I founded the data science organization for AIG in Asia, and I also ran the strategy and analytics function for the consumer and small business banking division at Wells Fargo. So I can speak to both worlds, and I hope that this speech, although it's sort of focused on sort of or framed within the insurance space, can actually kind of provide a lot of value for anyone in the room, whatever their industry may be. Finally, just most recently, I was the Chief Data Officer of Corvus Insurance. It was a company that focused on providing insurance against cyber risk. I left Corvus last year and have been doing some independent consulting ever since. In the last several months, I've been advising a group of experienced executives from technology, financial services, and consumer packaged goods industries to launch a strategic AI advisory firm that focuses on driving efficiency and effectiveness of go-to-market strategies through the use of new AI tools. This group of executives has observed that their clients and their former employers were struggling to create a proactive and yet strategic approach to using AI, and as a result, they're trying to create a firm that provides both practical and useful guidance for people who really understand their businesses. So what I'm hoping to do today is the following. I want to talk very specifically about generative AI. And generative AI is what everybody is now talking about, and it's very distinct from kind of the AI that I've been working on in the last 10 years, and that's really more about predictive analytics, right? So a lot of the modeling that's done in terms of thinking about, estimating customer lifetime value, or thinking about kind of conversion rates on ad campaigns, that type of predictive modeling has been around and in use for a while, as you guys all know. What's new is that this generative AI is all about the creation. I mean, it's leveraging data, and it's kind of creating content. It's creating images, pictures, sound that, previously had to be kind of, very carefully curated by kind of human expertise. And what we're finding is that this generative AI has not only the ability to create, but it has this inherent capability to learn and think about new capabilities that is really reshaping how we think about automation. And so what I want to do is talk about generative AI. I want to talk about my observations for how companies are using it today. I want to talk to you guys about opportunities across the entire value chain, not just in terms of marketing, but across the entire value chain in terms of creating value at your respective institutions. And then finally, I want to talk to each of you individually as professionals and encourage you to get your hands dirty with this technology, because I have a very strong view that this is going to change all professions, and I think that the better that we can understand it use it, and know its strengths and weaknesses from the beginning really creates a lot of insight into how we as experienced professionals are going to deliver value in the future. So that's really kind of the core of what I hope to talk about today. I hope to keep it really practical. I worry that we only have like 30 minutes to talk about it, so certainly if you want to engage in more conversation or talk further with me, I'm more than happy to do that. With that, I'm going to dive right in. So where are we with generative AI? Because it was really just about a year ago that like everybody started kind of saying, hey, what is this all about, right? And what you can sort of see here is, I don't know if you've heard of names like, certainly we've all heard of OpenAI, the maker of ChatGPT, but there are other companies out there like Anthropic or Perplexity. Don't know if you've heard of them, but you certainly have heard of the people that are behind the investing in them, right? So Anthropic is something that Google and Amazon are both invested in very heavily. They make a product called Claude, and I don't know if you're familiar with it, but Claude is an AI bot that is very, very good at creating content. I find that it's really, really good at kind of writing in ways that like ChatGPT is not. And so something for you guys to kind of consider and think about. OpenAI we're all very familiar with. You know that Microsoft is very, very heavily invested and aligned with what's going on with OpenAI. And Perplexity is a platform, people are talking about this as sort of like a competitor to Google search. Whereas at Google, what you're doing is you're sort of saying, hey, I'm interested in this topic, and you get like a whole bunch of pages and pages of links about what you're interested in. Perplexity basically says, well, what do you want to answer? What question do you want to answer? And it will go search the web, it will find sources, and it will summarize the answer, like what you are looking for, and it'll tell you the sources of information that it's actually drawn from. Would encourage you guys to just look at these three basic tools because they are really, really quite interesting and powerful, whether you're using it for business or you're using it for your own personal consumption. So all this to say is that this is the reason why there is so much noise around this, is because not only are these tools really useful, but they're being backed and recognized by some of the people who have absolutely revolutionized the technology landscape that we live and work and play in every single day. And further, what's happening here is that these companies are seeding like much more investment and awareness about like kind of consumer applications, right? So there's literally thousands. You can see this little kind of blurry figure at the bottom. I mean, these are like the new companies that have like blossomed in the last like just year, right? Like the number of companies that are kind of focused on AI has like grown by tenfold, right? And 40% of that growth has come just in the last year. Right? So, and what these companies are doing is they're creating very, very customized use cases for this foundational technology in ways that are very, very specialized. So think things like, there's this company called Character AI, and what they do is they kind of create it's basically, hey, I'm going to chat, it's somebody that I can kind of just chat with. That's something that Google's invested in, right? There's something called AlphaSense, which is a platform for financial information, something that is, again, very, very specific. And what you're going to see is, you yourself as an end consumer of these tools are going to be like absolutely hooked into kind of starting to use these tools in your daily life. And much in the same way that we sort of saw how like digital experience revolutionized our world in the financial services, you're going to get that same consumer push within enterprises to say, hey, look, I can do this, with my life. Why can't I do this in my job function, right? And so, companies are slowly starting to realize this. I don't know how many of you guys are feeling this pressure, but what we're hearing from a lot of the people that we talk to is that's what boards are interested in now, right? They're like, what's your AI strategy? What are you going to do, right? And there's sort of this very like hard push for people to think about, well, how does this fit into my business model? And, and yet, right, people are very reluctant. There's this whole issue about, well, our data privacy, our security, and it's particularly acute in the financial services business where we, have a responsibility not only to our customers, but also to regulators to make sure that we're using information responsibly. So, I mean, that's sort of where we are. We're gonna, as consumers and individuals, we're gonna see more and more of this, and it's going to pervade more and more of our lives. And there's going to be this disconnect because it's like, hey, why can't I do, like, on a personal level what, at work, what I can do at home? And I think that that's just going to try and accelerate things and, drive the need for value creation where we work, as well as where we play. Okay? So that's, I think, where we are in a nutshell. Now, I talk about this transition between predictive AI and generative AI. And one of the big shifts is just sort of the what they call the modality of how these models are able to operate. So in the traditional AI, it was mainly like structured data, right? Like, so you could take data from a database that was cleansed and well understood, and you can put that into predictive models to generate a lot of the output that you wanted. What's new and different about generative AI is that you can take not only text, right? So you can chat with a bot, but you can also feed it pictures, right? You can feed it video, you can feed it audio, and it will like now begin to interpret like everything about that and actually perform actions on the content that you're feeding it. And that's like one really huge change, and it like completely creates a new dimensionality in terms of the types of value that you can create. And I'm going to get into some specific examples of that later. But, with text, you can summarize, you can extract, you can analyze, you can kind of generate poems and scripts, and, those are the types of things that you can do with it. So, building marketing copy or, creating support chat bots, those are things that you can do all via text, right? Audio, you can do the same thing, but imagine like instead of being able to having to type, you can just speak to a chat bot and have it speak back to you, or have like an avatar of a person like kind of speaking back to you, right? Like it's this two-way multimodal output and input that is really quite exciting, because when you kind of pair that, you're thinking, okay, now like kind of machines can actually be much more human-like in sort of the things that they can and cannot do, right? So the one use case that I want to talk a lot about is code, right? One of the very early adopters of generative AI and where they kind of created a lot of value is in sort of software development and engineering, right? And at its core, what generative AI is that they're built on what's called language models, right? So it takes like huge amounts of like language and it learns from that, and then it kind of creates output. Well, coding is a very, very structured language, right? It's structured in ways that like regular language even isn't, right? It has lines and an order in which like things are done. The operations are well defined, right? So programmatically, it's even easier for and more effective for something like computer code. And that's why a lot of the development community has sort of said, well, wait a second, this has improved our productivity orders of magnitude, like 30, 60%, right? And that's why you kind of see companies like Amazon and Google being at the absolute forefront, because it is absolutely critical to their ability to develop product, to be able to do that in an inexpensive way, and to kind of scale that in ways that kind of allow monetization of value, right? So that's what you can actually do with it. And I think this slide is particularly relevant. It comes from McKinsey. Again, you can debate about like how accurate or not, like, kind of analysis that comes from large consulting firms may be. But I think the point of this slide is that look at kind of the value creation that people are looking at just in terms of like the world that's most relevant to the people in this room, and that's sort of the marketing and the sales side. That is like kind of where the big like near-term value creation opportunity is. And when you think about like content creation, personalization, kind of sales enablement, being able to kind of learn and understand customer needs, to be able to simulate like customer response and feedback, there's such an opportunity there to kind of think about like how you can begin to automate and accelerate and to improve the effectiveness of what we all do from a marketing and a sales perspective. Okay, so I'm going to now kind of dial back and just talk a little bit in a broader spectrum than just sort of marketing and sales. And I just want to speak a little bit about kind of what opportunities there are across the entire value chain in insurance. And we all drive cars, right? So you can all think about like your own experience in terms of, what it takes to insure your house or insure your car or, something like that. Like think about that customer journey for a moment. In terms of like the insurance world, a lot of thought and care goes into kind of product design and development. Being a very highly regulated industry, a lot of the features, the pricing of insurance products needs to be improved by regulators, right? You need to run it by, you need to get their approval. And so those kind of parameters of what you can and can't do aren't always easily known to, just someone who's like coming into the insurance industry as a new, like kind of, a new graduate, right? And, all of a sudden, all of these like rules and kind of decision criteria are something that like anyone can kind of like almost instantly kind of understand and be aware of. From a distribution perspective, there's a lot that goes into, think about how complex your insurance is, right? Like, is this covered? Is it not? Do I have a deductible, right? Like, under what circumstances do I get coverage and what do I don't? Like, what are my exceptions? Do you have a pool? Do you not, right? Like, so there's a lot that goes into kind of just defining what the risk is and then actually pricing that risk. And being able to not only collect information about what's relevant to a potential customer, but to also then collect information about their particular profile so that you can price their auto insurance. Like, do you have a Tesla? Is it new? Is it used? Right? Is it a Model X? Is it a Model Y? Right? Is it leased? Is it not? Right? Do you have a teen driver? Do you not? Like, all that information needs to be kind of collected from each one of us before that company can actually price the policy. And it's a pain, right? Like, just think about like what that takes in terms of like the thought and the energy. And, this is like these types of tools can kind of reduce that friction, right? So that's distribution. Underwriting, obviously, when an insurer kind of has all of these rules, they need to kind of like sort through all of the rules and the complexities to be able to say, okay, this is how much we would price a policy for Paul, or versus, I see my former colleague Tom out there, right? Like, he and I are very different. I'm dangerous, he's safe, right? Like, how do we make the judgment in terms of like charging me, the dangerous guy, more than Tom, the guy who's very responsible, right? So those types of things are hard to train. And, when we talk about kind of the talent gap in insurance, right? Like, this is something that could directly fill that type of gap, right? Where people don't want to go into insurance, yet they need to learn all of this minutia about like how to price a policy. Well, guess what? We're getting to the point now where some of this stuff can actually be automated. So there's an example. Portfolio management, obviously, you're managing your risk like you would like a loan portfolio. Investment management, that's a huge piece of how insurers make their money, is that they take premium and they invest it, and those investment returns are to some degree what may or may not subsidize your, kind of your losses. Claims, whoever's gotten in an auto accident before, what a hassle this is, right? I gotta go get an estimate. I gotta go to like 5 different shops. They're gonna tell me like what to do. They're gonna give me a rental car. This is a huge hassle, right? And then finally, customer support, right? Like calling in, imagine at Wells we used to have 10,000 people supporting just our consumer bank, right? And, insurance companies the same way. And you think about what you have to like train people on, to kind of like get them to be productive in that discussion. It's a lot, right? And, to be able to have like intelligent bots that can kind of answer these questions in a very consistent way that is compliant with how we need to speak to our customers from a regulatory standpoint, it's very difficult to train people to do that, right? And they churn, right? Like at Wells, we used to have like over 30% churn in these types of folks every year, right? So this is something that, you can sort of see. There's so much opportunity across the entire value chain in every function to be able to apply these tools. Okay. I'm going to now get into some very, very like specific examples so that, hopefully what you can do here is just sort of like, this will kind of spur some thinking on your part about, well, how can this be relevant to me in my job? And the reason why I want all of us to be thinking about that comes out at the end of my presentation. But the first one, and I think it's been kind of referenced a lot in this forum, so I'm not going to spend a lot of time on it, is just sort of the automation that can take place. So one of my colleagues is working with a group of people that was trying to launch a new feature for their product. And what he did is he sort of said, okay, look, I'm going to have just 1 hour discussion with the CTO. We're going to record that on video. And what we're going to do is we're going to have the AI basically record that, transcribe it, and then summarize it, right? So 1 hour conversation, and then he used a tool called ChatSonic, right? And in ChatSonic, you can kind of say, okay, I want you to write me a blog post, I want you to write me press release, and I want you to write me training materials. I want you to use this tone of voice, and I want you to include the following details. Did that, 1 hour, transcription, maybe another 15 minutes, 3 things are done. A blog post, a press release, and training materials. Now, that's something that was done almost like, within an hour, right? Granted, right, like it's not like you're going to release all of these things. You need some oversight in terms of like, hey, does this fit with the brand? Does it do what it needs to do? The point here though is that, all of a sudden you're creating, multiple outputs, you're getting a ton of leverage, right? And you're doing it at a speed and a pace which is like previously unheard of, right? So, again, very simple example, but very powerful in my view, and very accessible because this is like, go look it up. ChatSonic is something that you can use today. And again, no sponsorship here, right? Like use whatever tool you want. But the point is that these tools exist, and they exist in ways that allow you to be very much in control of the output that is generated. Risk management, this is amazing to me. I apologize for the people in the back about like, kind of the how small the text is. But the point is that this is something that basically, you can put together by using like kind of a paid version of ChatGPT, right? And you kind of feed ChatGPT a picture and you say, hey, like you're in charge of making this house has nothing bad happen to it, and you watch these webcams for signs of issues. Is there anything to worry about in this picture? Okay, no previous training, right? Like, it looks at the picture and it says, okay, well, look, this is a basement that's severely flooded. There's a lot of damage here, right? And imagine, like, you can now kind of start to begin to build a very systematic way of like taking input from a video camera and saying, okay, in a very simple way that like all of us in this room can probably execute. Say, okay, this is what I want you to do with these images. And all of a sudden you have a very sophisticated 24/7 tool that is doing risk management on like a property. And you think about it, if I could scale this across my entire portfolio and I could identify flooding very quickly and minimize the damage of like kind of the flood, that basically saves on loss costs in insurance. I mean, it's like, this is a very simple thing that can be done. Lenita, yes? Yeah, so what's really scary about this is that, there's been like no real training per se, right? Like, and again, if you think about that as sort of the baseline and you can put on top of that, like how you as a company want to interpret images, that's something that you can do too. There's something called fine tuning. It's an entire process of like taking a baseline large language model and adjusting the parameters of that model to suit a very specific business case that you are trying to solve, right? So that's what's referred to as fine-tuning. There are other methodologies which allow you to, kind of ensure that, like, if I'm asking it a question, that it will respond using kind of certain amounts of, like, or certain prescribed sources of information, right? That's called retrieval augmented generation, and there are many, many techniques for thinking about like how to control the response of the bot to make sure that it doesn't completely go off the rails, right? And my point here is that we're very much in the early stages of this, but it's moving so fast, right? Like, I started kind of working with these tools when they were just like single modal, i.e., it was just sort of text, right? And then within months, they're adding pictures, they're adding sound, right? And then one thing that's coming down the pike is called agents, right? And what agents allow you to do is to kind of string multiple things together, right? To sort of say, okay, take this action and then this action, put them together, and then do a third action, right? So imagine the difference between kind of asking ChatGPT to kind of give you an itinerary for your trip to Rome, right? And it gives this great itinerary and suggestions on what to do. And think about like connecting that to a platform that can actually like make you hotel reservations, restaurant reservations, book your tickets, to all the museums, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. This is sort of the future, right? Is where it's going to understand and begin to look at your personal preferences, right? Like, it's going to take your information, right? So, everybody's waiting for what Apple is going to do, right, with generative AI. They have this new technology that they've been working on. It's called Ferret. And what Ferret allows you to do is it allows you to kind of take multimodal inputs, right? So it allows them to kind of like watch what you're doing on your screen and like learn from that as a part of the input process in terms of what you're doing online, right? So, if it says, hey, Paul seems to like this type of restaurant, they can begin to understand my preferences and say, you know what, should we book restaurants that fit with your kind of profile, right? And that's the holy grail. When people have been talking about this, and I listen to kind of a lot of industry thought leaders, is that when they can incorporate your personal thoughts, right, your personal preferences into the AI to understand what's useful and what's not, that's the killer app for generative AI. Sure. Sure. So look, you're right in the sense that this is still very much the wild, wild west, right? Like, many of you have probably heard about kind of the New York Times suing OpenAI for use of their material in training the actual bot itself. And that's, currently unresolved, right? I think that a lot of this has to yet be sorted. I think that like patent and copyright lawyers are thinking, okay, like what are the implications here? But I think being in the financial services industry, we know one thing for sure, and that is that like regulation will come back at some point, right? And like kind of constrain us in ways that we never thought, we never thought about, and we certainly didn't think are necessarily reasonable in all cases, right? So I'm going to just kind of continue forward because I'm watching the clock here. Again, similar example here. I did this on my own. I took a picture from the internet. I said, hey, can you identify make, model, and year? And I did this because at AIG, we tried building a system like this with like over 3 million images just to be able to identify the car. No training. I put this into ChatGPT, and it was able to kind of like give me a summary of like the damage on this, speaking as if it was an auto claims adjuster, right? It's scary. It's really, really scary. Okay. I'm going to go through the challenges real quick, and then I'm going to basically, kind of give my little, I'm going to implore all of you to kind of get active, right? So the challenges, this stuff is all great. And you can think about like, hey, I think I can go build a chatbot really easily, and yes, you can, right? But you have to think about like cost, right? Like one of the things that we forget about is that like sending information to whether it's an open AI or it's even a closed kind of on-premise thing, these are costly endeavors, and you just need to be thoughtful about how that works and be very careful about your platform choices because this technology moves so quickly that you don't want to necessarily kind of go too deep in one area at the cost of like getting behind. Number two is, I alluded to this, the technology is changing so fast, right? I actually kind of built some chatbots, and I found out, and I invested like my own money in building them, and like within months, it was like useless. It was like, hey, OpenAI, you can just do this on the site, right? Like you don't need to kind of build your own custom bot. So you have to be worried about that. I talk about the thousands of like applications. We all know about shadow IT in this room, right? Like, hey, we want to use this, we want to use that. All the organizations in all the corporate enterprises that we work on are being bombarded with like kind of, hey, this is the next greatest AI solution. And managing that centrally in a way that's sort of compliant and secure is very, very difficult, right? So, you have to kind of think about that. I'm not going to get into it, but you can sort of read about the failures of people like Canadian Airlines. You can see like some of the issues that Bard and Gemini had in their early releases of like their models. Samsung had some proprietary content get leaked out by using ChatGPT. So, you have to be very, very careful about how you use it and selective, and make sure that you can understand the risk. And again, I don't need to reiterate, we're all financial services professionals. We know how important that can be. Okay, so I have 30 seconds left, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to implore you to do the following. One is, I don't know how active you are in using AI, but if you're not, I would suggest that you do it. And the reason for it is, I think all of us as professionals need to understand what this means for us and our professions and how we add value going forward. If you're kind of using these tools and you're not scared about like, your usefulness as a professional, then you probably don't like use it enough. And I say that because with genuine fear, like I think about like, for my children, what are they going to do, right? Like, what role actually, first of all, in my career, what am I going to do for the remainder of my career that's not going to get learned by AI, right? And I'll tell you, I think it's not much. I mean, I look back at my career and I say, what did I do after college? All that is automated now. There's no use for like what I did after college, right? And I think we need to like kind of just embrace that fact and think about the role that we can play, and that is that AI tools are just kind of toys right now, but they are going to be growing into something very, very mature. And we have the ability, we have the expertise, we have the experience to be able to help them kind of evolve to the point where they actually can do a lot of what we do today without our intervention. And that's what's going to happen, right? If it's not you, it's going to be somebody else. And that really kind of leads me to my last point, which is there's so much discussion about what AI is going to do to the labor force. There is no question in my mind that it will have some very, very difficult impact on AI. And you then turn to yourself and you say, hey, well, will AI take my job? And I would say to you, no, AI is not going to take your job, but somebody who uses AI will take your job, right? And so if nothing else, if you take nothing else from my talk, I hope you'll get some motivation to go out there and to experiment, to scare yourself, and then to think about like, okay, how do you fit in and how do you contribute? Thank you.
That's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. That was great. I think I need a Valium after that. You're like,